For the 5 months this show's been on the air, we've featured James O'Keefe's work quite a bit. First of all, because he's a fearless journalist exposing things that other journalists just won't do, but also because he's a good guy, and I've known him a long time. That's why we were really shaken up over the whole breakdown of Project Veritas, and everyone kept saying, what will happen with James O'Keefe? I told you there is no Project Veritas without James O'Keefe. I told you that James O'Keefe was going to have a story to tell, and well, yesterday, it dropped. He's got a story to tell, and this is what it looks like.
The irony of the Acorn story is that it took a 25-year-old with a hidden camera a few days to do what billion-dollar networks and journalists could not do in a decade. I spent 14 years creating the most effective nonprofit newsroom this country has ever seen. And in paving the way to establish citizen journalism, I have been defamed, arrested, raided, and ultimately removed from the organization I spent so much time developing credibility of. I always knew they would try to ruin the reputations of those who expose them, the pharma giants, the three-letter government agencies, and those who I thought I could trust. But in response, we are going to build an army of investigators and exposers. They have awakened a sleeping giant.
Yeah, and that sleeping giant joins us right now, James O'Keefe. OMG, O'Keefe Media Group. James, thanks for joining us.
How about that, Larry? A double pun.
I love it. And I also love the original image there of you with your mom's fur coat there. That's how I first met you. I mean, you weren't wearing the coat, but that's how you were when I first met you.
My grandmother's chinchilla. When I knocked on Andrew Breitbart, you and I both knew Andrew, and I knocked on his door in Westwood, Los Angeles.
Yep.
I told him that story, and he said, "Well, hard to believe it," but I went to his house, I showed him the tapes, and man, that changed everything.
Yeah, I'm sure it was that moment where, you know how when Andrew's eyes would like become these big, perfect circles, right? When he saw something like that, he'd be like, So listen, I want to talk about a little bit about what happened with Project Veritas, but I think the most important story today is what is O'Keefe Media Group? What are you going to be doing? And the biggest and most important thing about Project Veritas was that citizen journalists were able to send you tips and be a part of your organization. Can they still do that, and how do they do that?
Yeah, I think that the vision here is, I don't think I could have done this a year ago or a couple months ago. But now it seems like there's thousands of people that have messaged me since I was ousted by Veritas, and they're more inspired. They're more activated. So I want to create like Uber for journalism. I want to get the little tiny special cameras into the hands of thousands of people all over the world, all over the United States. And I want to mobilize them, and I want to equip them, and I want to empower them. See, I've always done it with a few people, maybe a dozen, 2 dozen people that were on my payroll. But I think it's about something bigger now. And I don't think I had that goodwill, Larry, a year or two ago. I tried to do this 6 years ago. I experimented with it. But I think people are really ready for it. And this organization is going to be putting cameras into the hands of hundreds of people. In fact, just yesterday, we already have a few thousand subscribers. You can go on our website. It's right behind my head there, and sponsor one of these special cameras so that we can give it to the citizens.
I think that's a fascinating idea. I got to ask you, though, listen, you've learned a lot of lessons over these, 14 years, I think it is, 13 years. You detail a little bit of the challenges you've had there in that launch video. You've had to learn those lessons, and you know the right way and the wrong way to go about this kind of journalism. Do you worry about that learning curve for all of these people that you're empowering through your group?
It's going to be challenging, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I mean, the world is on fire right now. Figuratively, literally, banks are collapsing, pharmaceutical companies are lying, three-letter agencies are abdicating their duties. So I don't know if we really have a choice but to take the necessary risks for the public's right to know. You are right. Like, there's recording law issues, there's ethics. Ultimately, journalism ethics is the thing that's going to make or break it. And I think this enterprise is going to be very, very successful. It's going to achieve its mission. But I think people have to have integrity. You need two things to be a journalist. You have to be fearless, and you have to have absolute integrity. That means no one can bribe you or tell you what not to report things. So yes, but I do think there's a lot of Americans who have these things, and I think we're going to find them. There's going to be some challenges, I've been raided, arrested, sued. I've been in jury trials twice in the last few years. But Larry, I'm still alive. I'm still here. And I've got a lot of the best people now. I had 70 employees at PV. I don't have that many right now. I have about a dozen. But these are ride or die good people. And I think good people beget more good people. So I just think that the world is ready for this now.
All right, so fearless and integrity. So more journalists like Don Lemon. Got it. Okay. So James, I do want to ask you, I've been commenting on this whole Project Veritas drama for quite some time. I know you've been busy. I compared you to Steve Jobs, the geniuses at Apple who decided that the company would do better without Steve Jobs. And well, we saw how that worked out. But when they did finally bring the genius of Steve Jobs back, they made sure that he was in an environment so he could do what he did best. And then there was a management infrastructure that did a lot of the other stuff. Sounds to me like you didn't have that kind of support at PV. It sounded like they weren't putting you in a place where you could thrive doing what you did and then supporting you. That's what a board is supposed to do in this situation.
Yeah, I learned a lot of lessons from this, Larry. And the thing about life is that sometimes the best way to learn is the hard way. You could say I got an MBA in 2 weeks, or maybe even something more valuable than an MBA, right?
Yeah.
But I there's a lot to say on this. I don't know if you saw my 45-minute remarks in my office departing.
Oh, yes.
Which is really what that was from the heart. That was something I put a lot of thought into, and that really is the extent of what I have to say on it. But
all right.
To answer your question, Steve Jobs, I mean, one of the things he said was that the heaviness of the burdens of running a company, and I was the CEO, I was the chairman and CEO of Project Veritas. It was a company. It had 70 employees, a $25 million budget, and leadership. You feel the weight of the responsibility of running a budget, of hiring and firing. And ultimately, when you're the leader, you can't delegate that ultimate responsibility. You are responsible for everything. That was Steve Jobs said when he was fired from Apple, it was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. And Steve entered one of the most creative periods of his life in 1985. And I've felt that over the last couple of weeks. I've learned a lot of lessons. Larry, I never really paid attention to board composition. I wasn't focused on that. There were no real donors on our board. I never really thought about the political machinations of how the board of directors works because I was so focused on running the company.
Right.
So I've learned a lot. More effective now, I think.
That's kind of my point. You shouldn't have had to worry about that. You should have had a good infrastructure around you so that they could worry about it. A lot of speculation about the timing, though. Do you think that the Pfizer expose was in some way related to what ended up happening? Because a lot of people were speculating about that.
Well, I mean, like I said in my remarks, it's like I'm the same guy for 13 years. I mean, I was definitely a hard guy to work for. I would say I was a task master. I was demanding of people. I would try to fit too much in a day. That's usually the criticism. James, you're doing too much. You're trying to pack too much in. And I acknowledge that was a hard guy to work for in that respect. But I never changed. I probably got better over the years. And about 8 days after the biggest story in the history of my life, I was removed. So I only have circumstantial evidence, Larry, but that is truly a strange timing there.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know you don't want to say where you're focusing because that would be sort of calling where you're throwing the pass, but we should suspect the same kind of targets that we've seen from you?
I think in greater volume. And I think yes, I think the general is like the 3-letter agencies, the big pharmaceutical companies. I really want to stay on the Pfizer beat. Debbie, the whistleblower, went on stage with me at CPAC. I don't know if you saw that. And there's more where that came from. And I think every school board, every city council meeting, if you expand into every state house, hundreds of cameras everywhere, the stories tend to find us. So what I want you guys to do is go to O'Keefe Media Group. You can sponsor one of these cameras. I recognize they're not cheap. The real good ones are about $1,000, but you can sponsor one of those so that I can buy hundreds of them and ship them to people, Larry. And yes, we're going to be releasing our first stories in the next few days.
Is that right? That quickly?
That quickly. We don't mess around here. I was thrown out of the company I founded, and within 30 days, I've stood up another one. So we're going to keep moving.
No workshopping, no out-of-town tryouts. He's going for his Broadway opening. That's the O'Keefe I know. O'Keefe Media Group, OMG. Thanks, James. We'll have you back. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.